So James Franklin was just hired at Virginia Tech as their new head coach, and I think this is going to be one of the better moves Virginia Tech has made in the past few years. And I think it's going to work out great for both parties. As a program, I think Virginia Tech can be just as good as Penn State, and if not better. And I think James Franklin's going to keep them or going to take them to a great spot. And when it comes to the Penn State side of things, what are we doing, Penn State? I mean, they really haven't seemed to have a plan after firing James Franklin. And if you look at the recruiting side of things, Penn State went from the 15th ranked recruiting class, and they are now the 81st ranked recruiting class in the country for the 2026 cycle. 6 4-star players and 12 3-star players have decommitted from Penn State after they fired James Franklin, and many of those players are visiting Virginia Tech this week. So it has not gone well for Penn State so far after firing him, and I don't really know if they had a plan.
Yeah, I think Penn State, mostly the fan base and some of the boosters and all that, they got ahead of themselves here with the I would call unrealistic expectations. I don't understand why they feel that if they're not winning national championships that they're failing. I think James Franklin had them about as good as you can have Penn State. They're a step away multiple times from a national championship as of recent. Just this year, about 7 weeks ago, they're going down to a double overtime game with Oregon, who's a top 10 team right now. And in the middle of their game, their fan base is booing and chanting, "Fire James Franklin." And you're in the middle of a one-score game with a top 10 team right now. I, I don't know. I think the Penn State fan base pretty much themselves tore down their program. I don't think they understood how good they had it with James Franklin. It's going to be a mistake that it's obviously hurting them already in the short term. And in the long term, I don't think that there's really a solution right now that looks like it's going to be anything too much better. If you look at the betting odds, according to Athlon Sports for their next head coach, they got Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri, they got Brent Key from Georgia Tech, and Brian Hartline, the Ohio State offensive coordinator. You can't tell me right now either of those guys is going to magically win them a national championship or whatever Penn State fans think their expectations are supposed to be. I think there's a lot of delusion that went into this. I know Penn State's an easy team for me to make fun of, but I truly think it was an embarrassing end by their fan base to the James Franklin tenure there. And I mean, moving on from the Penn State part of it, this was a great hire by Virginia Tech. They look to bring themselves back to where they were. If you look at them in the mainly the mid 2000s to about 2010, they were winning 10, 11 games a year. They were one of the top programs in college football. Everybody loved going and playing at Virginia Tech. It's been a while now since they've been in that form, and I think James Franklin is the perfect type of coach to bring him back to that same dominant form. So now moving on into the games this week. The first big game we got is probably the game of the week is number 15 USC is heading to number 7 Oregon. Oregon's favored by 9.5 right now according to FanDuel. This game is absolutely gigantic when it comes to Big Ten playoff implications. The winner of this game is going to put themselves in a really good spot to make a playoff game. The winner of this could also put themselves in a spot for a Big Ten championship appearance, depending on what happens in other games like the Ohio State and Michigan game. There's all those kind of implications going on, but when you look down at the stats, it should be a great matchup. The the USC offense, has been excellent this year. They're one of the top scoring offenses in the country. They've been throwing the ball extremely well with Jane Maiava. Meanwhile, the Oregon defense has been one of the top in the country all year. They're stopping the run and the pass. They're the number one pass defense in the country this season so far. They haven't always played the greatest passing offenses out of the Big Ten, and when they played Indiana, they gave up some yards. So there's a chance where those stats are a bit deceiving, but in the end, I think Oregon's got a good talent advantage right now. I don't think they've quite reached their peak this year. I've been high on them, and this whole year kind of waiting on them to hit that peak and get ready for the playoff run, maybe do something similar to what Ohio State did last year. So I see Oregon controlling the game at home and winning about 34-21 and covering the 9.5 spread.
Yeah, I agree. I've expected Oregon to be a lot better, and I've expected them to hit this certain type of peak. But it just seems that it hasn't happened so far, and I just don't see it happening this week either. I think the matchup to watch in this game is going to be the USC pass game versus the Oregon defense. I think whoever wins that matchup will have a great chance to win the game. And some keys to victory for each team that I have. For UFC, or we both said that.
I said the same thing.
For USC, if they get the run game going and they stop Oregon's run, I think it's going to put young quarterback Dante Moore in some bad spots, maybe force a turnover. And then for Oregon, if they can get the run game going and keep possession of the football for as long as possible, keep that very talented USC offense off the field, I think that's going to help them. But my pick for this game, I kind of just have a weird feeling that USC is going to pull off this upset. I know it's 9.5, and that seems like a lot when you're picking an upset, but I think USC is going to pull off something a little crazy.
Yeah, that would be a great win for Lincoln Riley and the program of USC, and it could, like I said earlier, propel them right into a playoff spot. The next matchup we're going to talk about here is a night game at 8 o'clock, and that's number 11 BYU heading to Nippert Stadium at Cincinnati. BYU's favored by 2.5 in this game. They're still a one-loss Big 12 team. They still have a chance to win out the rest of the way and then go to the Big 12 championship and put on an impressive performance there and find themselves in a playoff spot. I think the big matchups here, stats-wise, can BYU control the game again, or can BYU's run game control the game against Cincinnati's defense? Cincinnati's defense has not been great against the run this year, and if BYU had it their way, they'd be able to just run the ball all day, every day. So I think they're going to look to do that. I can see them doing that well. Cincinnati's been struggling more as of recent, and I see BYU taking another big step towards the Big 12 championship game and winning about 27-21 and covering the 2.5 spread.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I think that if BYU, or with Cincinnati being one of the worst defenses in the country, their rushing defense is ranked 90th in the country. Their passing defense is 109th in the country. So I think with that, BYU is going to keep doing what they've been doing all year, and that's running the ball, holding the clock, and kind of just grinding wins out against teams. And I think BYU is going to take this one. And I think -2.5 is a great number.
Yeah, definitely. -2.5 BYU at Cincinnati seems like one of the best bets of the week, I would say. The next game we're going to transition into here, it's a noon game, and it's kind of an underrated game, I feel like, for the casual fan of college football. But number 22 Missouri heads to number 8 Oklahoma this week. Oklahoma's favored by 7.5 right now, which seems a bit high, honestly. If you look at the two teams, Missouri's defense has been excellent this season. They got a lot of talented players in their front seven. They've defended the pass well against some good pass defenses in the SEC. So with a team that's got a really good defense, I'm always a fan of thinking they're going to keep things close and be able to compete with even teams that are better than them right now. Oklahoma's offense as well, to kind of piggyback off of that, Oklahoma's offense has not been great this year. They've been winning a majority of their games off of an excellent defense and special teams. So this game's looking like it's going to be a really probably low-scoring game. The over-under is only at 42.5. I think that a random turnover or two could completely shift this game and surprise some people with a random Missouri win here at the end of the year to shake things up in the SEC. But in the end, I see Oklahoma pulling out by about 3 and getting the win, but Missouri to cover the 7.5 point spread.
Yeah, for this game, I see it as a huge defensive matchup. Both these teams are really good on defense, but the big matchup that I would point out is Missouri's running game against the Oklahoma defense. If Missouri can get it going on the ground, it's going to be hard to stop. And Missouri has been very close in a lot of different games this year, especially at home. I know they had a home game, a very crushing loss to Alabama where they just about pulled it off. And then I think whoever gets the huge explosive plays on offense will have the advantage and end up winning this game. And I think that kind of favors Oklahoma in a way because they have a lot of talented guys on offense that just haven't been putting up the numbers that you would expect. But with that, I'm going to take Oklahoma to win, but Missouri to cover the 7.5.
The fourth and final big game of the week we're going to talk about is Pittsburgh at number 16, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's favored by 2.5 right now, according to FanDuel. This is an absolutely, just like the USC-Oregon game in the Big Ten, this is a giant game in the ACC here. Both teams have one conference loss, and they're looking to put themselves in a prime position to send themselves to the ACC championship. Georgia Tech plays Georgia next week in Atlanta, so this is their last ACC game. So if they win this one, they will be heading to the ACC championship game with a chance to clinch themselves a spot in the playoff. The main first thing I want to bring up with keys to this game is Pat Narduzzi actually cares this week. If you guys remember last week, Pat Narduzzi, the Pittsburgh head coach, before the Notre Dame game, had that old spew about he'd gladly give up 100 against them since it wasn't an ACC game. Well, now he's got an ACC game this week, so Pittsburgh should actually care, I guess, and maybe bring some more effort. They throw the ball well. The Georgia Tech defense does not defend the pass too well, so there's some opportunities for Pitt to put some points on the board. Haynes King and the Georgia Tech offense have really carried the team this year. They've won a lot of close games off the backs of, not even the backs, plural, more singular, Haynes King. He throws the ball and runs the ball, and their offense goes as he does, and the team kind of goes as he does. I think they're going to win this game and put themselves in a great position to play Georgia next week. They can win that game, and they'll be a top 10, even maybe pushing the top 5 after that with a spot in the ACC championship. And Georgia Tech could be on the on the upward trajectory to a great finish here. It's going to be a high-scoring game probably. Neither defense has been crazy effective all year. I see Georgia Tech winning about 35-31, but I do see them covering that small spread of 2.5.
Yeah, I just can't erase what Narduzzi said last week and what happened against ND last week. They weren't able to stop the run, and that was supposed to be one of their strong points. And I trust Georgia Tech and their coaching staff a little bit more than Pittsburgh and their coaching staff and their players to be more motivated for this one. I just can't get it out of my head what he said. And Georgia Tech they have a strong coaching staff. They've been motivated in every single one of their games, and I think they're gonna cover the 2.5 and win this game. And that transitions perfectly to my best bets of the week, because my first one is Georgia Tech minus 2.5 against Pitt, and I just explained why. And then my next one is BYU minus 2.5 against Cincinnati. I really like that number. The next one I have is Tennessee minus 3.5 at Florida. I think Florida's pretty much checked out at this point. What happened against Kentucky a few weeks ago or last week, I can't remember. It was not good, and that's just a lasting image that I have in my head of Florida. The next one I have is USC plus 9.5 at Oregon. I already explained why I would like that one. And the last one I have for you is Tulane minus 8.5 at Temple. I think I talked about them in the first episode that we did, and I just trust Tulane's coaching staff a little bit more than Temple's coaching staff. I like John Summerall to go in there and cover the 8.5.
Yeah, we have some agreements here on the best bets of the week. The Tulane one you just talked about, I think Tulane's looking to try to work themselves into that final group of 5 playoff spot here, and if they can get a dominant win at Temple and then finish up with another win and head to the American Championship, they can put themselves in that position. So Tulane minus 8.5 at Temple is one of my best bets too. I also agree on the Georgia Tech and the BYU bets to each cover the 2.5. I think the 2.5 number seems honestly like FanDuel's giving us a great one to bet on there. And then my final one that's different here is I got Maryland plus 13.5 against Michigan this week. The main factor of this is Michigan's got the Buckeyes next week. The Buckeyes have been victim to this too in the past, where Ohio State or Michigan the week before that game does not play as well. You can tell they were kind of looking ahead, and Michigan as well this year has not been great against the spread, especially in the last couple weeks against teams like Purdue and Northwestern. So I got Maryland plus 13.5 as a great bet against Michigan this week. So that's all we got for the games this week. It's more of a lower quality week, I guess you'd say, compared to some of the others in terms of high-ranking matchups, but it's kind of always been like this, and we know it's going to lead into some mayhem next week with rivalry week coming up, and there's always some crazy stuff happening then. The last thing we're going to talk about here is more of a overarching theme of college football, and it's just something that's been bothering me, and I know it bothers Reg too. It's bothered us for a little while here, where the conference switch-ups and the teams that are in each conference. If you look back at some of the old standings, there is absolutely no reason we needed to switch a thing except for guys in suits that want to make more money. In the Big 12, we had teams like Missouri and A&M, and Oklahoma and Texas were still there. It was a great conference. We had the Big East with teams like Syracuse and Rutgers, and West Virginia was good at the time, battling it out. The Big Ten was just the Big Ten. It wasn't the Big 18 or whatever the hell we're at now. We had the Conference USA. That was basically what the American is now. They competed just as well as they back then as they do now. The independents were the classics: Navy, Notre Dame, and Army. There's just, you can go on in the list here, and the biggest one is the Pac-10, the Pac-12. It was a great conference, especially right at the end there. Teams like Oregon, USC, Washington, Stanford was good there for a while. They were always competing with each other. There was just absolutely, to me, if you're looking at it from the college football fan perspective, there was no reason to move all these teams around. I know there's guys in suits that probably have graphs about how much more money they can make with this team playing this team or whatever their stupid reasons are, but overall I just wanted to bring up that I think it's an absolute travesty the way they divided up these conferences and where we're at right now in terms of conferences in college football.
Yeah, I know. We've been talking about this ever since they decided to kind of mess the whole thing up. And I mean, when you look at those conferences, those were just absolutely perfect. The names actually meant something. You played people around you. And like you said, the only reason that it's the way it is right now is because of the people making the decisions are not people that actually give a shit about college football. It's more people that care about making a few extra $1 million every year. And I just don't think the fate of the sport should be in those type of people's hands. We need somebody like Josh Pate to be the college football commissioner, and that would be. He seems to have quite the overarching view that I think values college football more than the dollar sign. And if we don't get back to doing that, then I think it could go to a place where college football is not the same thing anymore, and the regular season just has no value.
Yeah, that kind of brings me on to the next thing I've been more upset about lately, I've been hearing about, is this idea of a 2014 playoff presented by the commissioner of the Big Ten, and kind of along the same lines here as the conferences. It's just that would completely change what people love about college football, what the actual fans of college football love. The thing about college is when you turn on the game every week, you know if your team loses, that could determine your entire season. I love the NFL too, but when you turn it on every week, if your team loses, there's next week and we could go 10-7 and make the playoffs. You know if you're going to make the playoffs and compete for a national championship in college, you're going to have to win, 10 out of 12 of your games now. And even with the 12-team playoff, we've slightly diminished the value of the regular season. But if we would go to a 24-team playoff, it'd be hard for me as an Ohio State fan to not every year just be like, oh, why would I care so much about the regular season? Even if we go 8-4, they'll probably put us in. So it's hard to hear people talk about that when you know it's someone that's not a true long-term fan of the sport and they're just looking at the dollar signs they can make out of it.
Yeah, something we pointed out last week. Pat Narduzzi would have never said what he said last week if it wasn't a 12-team playoff. If it was still 4 or 2 teams that and ended up playing for a national championship, he has to win all these games. Notre Dame is a huge game. That's a huge game for both of those teams. And instead of just Notre Dame and Pittsburgh, I'm apparently not giving a shit about winning the game. But yeah, I just think if you keep going in the direction that we're going, it's not gonna get any better.
Yeah, that's what it takes away from so much of the beauty of college football. If you listen to old Nick Saban interviews, he'd get mad if they gave up 20 points to a team like Georgia Southern. And because you wanted to be excellent, you wanted to be almost as perfect as you could be every single week you went out there, because that was the greatness of college football. To be a national championship team, you had to be perfect every single week, and you wanted to win all your games. I remember, and I believe it was 2017, I'm watching the Buckeyes in my basement, and we lose a regular season game to Michigan State, and their kicker's running around our field after a last-second kick, and I'm just devastated because our season is over. We can't compete for a championship at that point. And I think that was the greatness of college football, and I just don't want us to keep straying away from that. So yeah, there's just some small complaints there that are going on right now with the more of the state of the total scene of college football, but in the end, we always love the sport. It's the greatest sport in the world, and We're going to keep watching it every week, and we're going to keep hoping you guys are tuning in with us every week. We'll keep bringing you more content, and thanks for listening.